say this every week, but this show is getting epic. As always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and I'm going to be breaking down Foundation Episode 7, so it will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, don't watch this video just yet. Now, for all the time jumping that we had in the first 4 or 5 episodes, the last 2 have been pretty solid in the same time frame, and this one picks up exactly where we left off last week. Salvador and the Anacreans have arrived at the Invictus, and we'll learn a bit of backstory about what's going on here with this ship. It's rumoured to be the strongest ship that was ever made by the Empire, and it's a world killer. It's a sort of Marie Celeste as well, and we find out later on what's going on with that in the episode, but I'll get into that in a bit. So we learn that they're not just after the jump drive, because we do get a bit of exposition about how the Empire has kept that technology limited to themselves, so it's not as widely available as we thought. It's certainly not like warp drive in the Star Trek universe. It seems to be a sort of regulated technology, a bit like jet engines are in our... And again, this sort of lack of technology being shared is something that could... was one of the small cracks that could lead to the fall of the Empire. It's one of these things that they keep hinting at, that these little things that are just picking away in the background, as well as these sort of big A-plots with the Anacreans and what's going on with Brother Day as well. But certainly things aren't looking good for the Empire in this episode. The Invictus still has automated defences, so they can't send any ships in without them being blown up, so they need to do a space jump. Now, the CG is generally pretty strong in this show, but I wasn't a huge fan of this. The green screen through the space jump and in the bit when they're on the Invictus before they get inside didn't look that impressive. The sets, even though it's supposed to be the outside of this huge, moon or planet-sized ship, just looked a bit naff to me, but that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But yeah, it does look more like a space station than a battleship. We do find out that it's supposed to be a world killer, and during the assault on the defence system, Hugo dies, or at least we think he dies. We don't see a body, so I think he's going to come back, but there hasn't been any hints of that so far. I mentioned a minute ago, the ship has a sort of reputation of showing up randomly and just being regarded what we'd call a ghost ship. And the reason for this is it's been programmed to jump randomly as well, so that's why it keeps showing up in different places at different times. And it's on a timer between jumps, so to add a little bit of suspense to this episode, they have to learn to take control of the ship, or at least take control of the jump drive, in order to stop them jumping. But picking up from last week as well, Brother Day is pretty pissed at Demerzel, and quite rightly so, for publicly humiliating him. And he feels pretty betrayed, and yeah, if she's supposed to have loyalty to you and all your brothers or your clones or whatever, you can understand why, because this is the closest thing to a mother that these guys are going to have. She raises them his whole life and her whole life, which appears to be quite long, and he does remind her of that she's a robot and she doesn't have a soul either. And he does sort of question where her loyalties lie and what her job is, and what's very interesting is she says that her role is to make sure that the dynasty continues. So I do think that she's affecting some of the things that are happening with the younger brother Don, that I'll get to later in this episode. But Demerzel, I hope we get to see more of her in the second season, or at least the last few episodes of this season, because they haven't really went into her character too much outside of her relationship with the clones. Yeah, the fact that she doesn't have a soul, Halima, who's soon going to be Proxima Halima, might have a bit of an issue with this, but I don't think she'd have any issue of using Demerzel's belief against the clones or the Cleons. And she does get elected Proxima, and Day, just wants to get this confrontation out of the way. He thinks he can buy her. He tries to up his offer of basically trying to improve the infrastructure on the planet, and I can understand why he's not doing any sort of political backstabbing here, because this guy, or these guys, have never had any sort of political or real challenge to their power, so why not attack it head on? As far as he's concerned, he's immortal. But she can't be bought off that easily, because the one thing that she wants is to end the dynasty. And this is going back to this whole faith, or belief in faith. She explains the reason that she can't be bought off is she believes that the dynasty is fundamentally wrong and arrogant, or I should say that the first Cleon was arrogant, that he wanted to continue this. And I'm surprised by how direct with each other they are. I thought this show was going to be a bit more Game of Thrones with political manoeuvring, backstabbing going on. But as I mentioned, this is the first time that this guy's ever had a challenge, and I think she knows this. I think Halima's a lot smarter than we've seen so far. I hope there is some sort of political stuff, maybe going into the 2nd season as well. But Dave, he really sees her as a serious threat, but he wants to play her at her own game, and he says that he wants to complete the spiral, which is a sort of endurance of belief that these people have to go through. Not everyone, it's sort of like a pilgrimage type thing, but it does seem to take quite a great deal of physical toll, and there is a significant risk of death. Demerzel said that she did do it, and she explained the amount of people that she saw fall by the wayside or get injured or actually die in the process. But before day is dawn, I'm sorry, it's the first clone joke, at least I don't have to explain how the clones work anymore, because quite frankly, I'm sick of it and I'm not going to do it again. He's still on his love kick with Azora, and yeah, it's another sign that he's diverting from the Cleons, or I should say his brothers, and he feels that he's worried that they're actually going to notice, because he's noticed the differences, subtle things like how they hold their thumbs or how they rub their fingers together, and he's got to try and mimic it because it's not something that he does naturally. Other things like personal taste, music and art that they like, because that's things that he doesn't like. We've already seen evidence of how the clones' sort of different tastes can diverge, so maybe this has happened before. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, or earlier on, I do think that Demerzel is more of a hand in this than we're getting to see so far, because this doesn't just happen out of nowhere on the 15th or 16th Cleon. Something has to have happened behind the scenes that we don't know yet that's caused this divergence from the other clones. Back to other videos as well, I think it was my last one, I did ask the question what would happen if one of the brothers died, and how they would fill the sort of gap, because there would be quite a huge gap between one getting born and then becoming a teenager and then becoming a man and then becoming a very old man. So would they just age out? And the answer is no. We find out that all the clones have clones backup. Double clones. I'm not even going to try to explain it. If you've seen the episode, you understand what I mean. But basically, for every day, dusk and dawn, there's a clone that is floating in a tube waiting to be born if they should ever get injured or killed or something like that happens. In this case, it's not an injury or an accident the guy has to worry about, it's the fact that he doesn't fit in. He says that to Azora, it's basically blend in or die. Now, she's encouraging him to run away from the clones, and he explains that he can't because of all this technology and the fact that his face is recognisable. And for every sort of thing that he hits out or reason that he says that he can't leave, she explains that how they would get round that problem. Now, because the clones weren't in the book, this is just all guesswork on my part. If you had a rogue Empire clone and that guy wanted to raise an army and get some followers, he'd probably do it. So I think this could be something that contributes to the fall of the Empire later on, because again, they're not in the book, so it is just guesswork. But if I'm right, I'm right, and if I'm wrong, I'll be very interested to find out what is going to happen with this story. This episode does fit a lot in after the slower pace of the sort of middle ones, and we get back to Gal trying to restart the Seldon hologram. Now, what I didn't expect with this is the hologram seems conscious and self-aware. He knows that Gal's not supposed to be there, and he's confused as Gal's supposed to be on Terminus leading the First Foundation to help with deal with the first crisis, which basically is what Salvor's doing at the moment. The hologram does seem to be an exact copy of Harry Seldon's consciousness at the time of his death, and explains the reason that he had to die as the Foundation needs a figurehead that was bigger than a man. They needed essentially a Jesus character, so again it's going back to the faith sort of line in this season. And because this is an exact copy of Harry, the old sort of student-mentor rivalry, or not rivalry, but you know, Gal not really wanting to listen to Harry but she needs his guidance kind of thing, rears its ugly head. And I can understand why she's pissed. She's unhappy that Harry didn't tell her how he was going to die and how it affected her and Raish, because they are people and Harry didn't see them as people, he just seen them as part of this equation that he was trying to work out in this grand plan to deal with the problem. Gal's part in the plan does start to come into focus pretty quickly towards the end of this episode. We find out that she's got precognition, or at least some sort of version of precognition, which again reminded me of Dune, which I watched again last night. And she's got a great line where she says that she can feel the future. So both Gal and Salvor we've seen the displays of some sort of interest in mental powers, and if you have read the books you can kind of guess where this is going to go. It's going to play a huge role if they ever get to the Second Foundation on TV, and I hope they do, because this show is at a bit of a middling pace and you can tell that the production suffered from COVID, but I'm glad that it is going to get a season 2. It was another solid episode, but the ship stuff with Salvor did feel a bit like escape rooms, and there's only a few episodes seem to go, so it seems to be that the attack on Trantor is where season 1 is going to leave off. But I'm glad we're getting some answers, and we still don't know much about the vault. I thought we would see it this week. I thought we'd actually see it before we'd get any answers from Harry and the Gal story. She's still stuck on the ship going towards Harry's home planet, but this revelation could change its course, and it could change the course of the Foundation as well. I thought this was an incredibly tightly packed episode, but it answered a lot of questions which have been long overdue, and I'm looking forward to the rest of them. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, or as always, you can follow me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. My name's been Al, thanks for watching, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel.